Salam, peace be upon you. We continue where we left off in previous part. We have already certified something severe together, and I want to begin by saying it back to you in one breath, because this is the breath that keeps us honest. Episode 14 is not a worldview. It is not a history. It is not a meaning system. It is a compiler. It takes raw comparisons inside a finite licensed window and either outputs certified structure or refuses, with an audit trail. Only differences in phi are public. Absolute phi is mute. Every claim must carry a passport, coherence, identifiability, an honest ceiling called NMAX, priced uncertainty, invariance stress tests, and replication discipline. If any of that fails, we do not explain it away. We revoke it. Good. That is our ground. Now I'm going to do the move that prevents an entire program, 37 parts, years of work, from quietly drifting into mythology. I'm going to freeze the layers, and I'm going to freeze them in a way that is simple enough for your ear to hold, but strict enough to survive every temptation that comes later. Because the greatest danger ahead of us is not a wrong equation. The greatest danger is a wrong category. A sentence that belongs to a later layer sneaks into an earlier layer, wearing the costume of just a definition. And nobody notices because it sounds beautiful, or because it sounds familiar, or because it sounds like the kind of explanation we're used to hearing. And then the whole system becomes circular. It starts proving what it secretly assumed. So what I'm installing in this part is a kind of immune system. Not against mistakes, mistakes are normal, but against drift, against category collapse. I want you to picture a cathedral being built from stone, not a small house. A cathedral meant to survive 1,000 winters. The builders do not start with stained glass. They do not start with poetry. They start with the quarry, the tools, the measurements, the foundation, then the pillars, then the arches. And only after the structure is certified, only after it can hold weight, do they hang the art. What we're building is even stricter than a cathedral, because we're not building a building inside one universe. We're building the conditions any universe must satisfy to be publicly readable at all. So we need a discipline the builders of cathedrals used instinctively. Never confuse structure with decoration. Never confuse foundations with stories. Never confuse what is certified with what is hoped. That discipline is layering, and the heart of layering is simple. Every sentence gets tagged before it gets trusted. Not a window passport like we use for experiments. This is different. This is a layer tag, a stamp that says, what kind of statement is this? Is it a structural grammar statement? Is it a becoming statement? Is it an atlas navigation statement? Or is it an open research frontier statement that we are not allowed to treat as certified? And I'm going to make this so strong that later, when we're tempted to argue about truth, we will first tag the sentence. Because most truth wars are not truth wars. They are layer wars. One person is speaking grammar, the other is speaking becoming, and they collide. Or one person is speaking an atlas ordering, the other is speaking a licensing rule, and the system sounds contradictory when it's only misfiled. So let me give you the 4 tags, 4 drawers, simple enough to remember, strict enough to enforce. Picture a cabinet with 4 drawers. If you put the wrong thing in the wrong drawer, you don't just make a small mess. You lose track of what you know, what you assume, and what you are merely imagining. Drawer 1 is Phi 0, the structure grammar layer. Phi 0 is structure grammar. Phi 0 is timeless legality. Phi 0 is the court of admissibility. It does not tell you what the universe does. It tells you what you are allowed to claim about any universe, given finite comparisons, without cheating. What goes in the phi 0 drawer? Windows, passports, coherence thresholds, identifiability gates, the ceiling Nmax, uncertainty budgets, lift discipline, branch cuts, excision, certified domain D. The A field defined as the derivative of the locally unwrapped phase, finite jets up to the ceiling, invariance collapse under equivalence, Atlas overlap closure, topology tokens like holonomy, defect compilation, derived geometry as readout, invariant bases, stability certification, scale stratification without time, escape tests, handoff interfaces as empty sockets, not as content. And here the signature. Phi 0 never says anything happens. Phi 0 never says anything evolves. Phi 0 never tells a cosmological story. Phi 0 is what must be true for structure extraction to even be meaningful. Drawer 2 is Phi 1, the becoming layer. Phi 1 is becoming. Phi 1 is where update laws live. Phi 1 is where time evolution becomes a disciplined concept. Phi 1 is where probability and entropy can appear as formal objects, but only later, on top of already certified structure. What goes in Phi 1? Dynamics, equations of motion, time evolution, causality in time, probability measures, entropy, selection, optimization, anything with a verb like unfolds, drives, becomes, evolves, flows, selects, learns. And the key rule? Phi 1 is not allowed as certified content in episode 14. In episode 14, Phi 1 is a door label in the hallway. We can point to it when we need to say later, but we do not walk through it. Drawer 3 is Phi 2, the Atlas and semantics layer. Phi 2 is the Atlas. Phi 2 is navigation. Phi 2 is where you place domains, regimes, and volumes after you have grammar and after you have chosen becoming rules. Cosmic to stellar to planetary to chemical to biological to cognitive to cultural to abstract. That ordering is not grammar, it's navigation. Phi 2 also includes semantics and meaning, how humans interpret, how a world feels, how concepts get used socially. The map of domains is not the same as the rules of extraction. And in episode 14, Phi 2 is also not allowed as certified content. We can mention it as an interface. Later, we will build atlases. But we do not start filing reality here. Drawer 4 is Research Frontier. Research Frontier is the honest boundary of what we do not yet know, what we have not yet compiled, what remains an open slot. What goes in Research Frontier? Questions like, what exact update law produces our universe? How exactly do known laws emerge from this framework in specific regimes? What exact thermodynamic coarse graining yields the second law? What exact quantum to classical boundary mechanism arises under which ceilings? What exact operational signature captures consciousness without smuggling meaning? Research frontier statements are not illegal, but they are never allowed to function as justification inside Phi Neuro. They're pinned as open. They're targets, not trophies. Now I want you to feel what this does. This is not bureaucracy. This is the difference between a system that can be tested and a system that can only be admired. Without layer tags, you can always hide. If somebody challenges you, you slide into a different layer and act like you were there all along. That is how bad philosophy becomes unfalsifiable. That is how bad physics becomes metaphysics. That is how beautiful language becomes a trap. We will not do that. So here is our hard rule. Every sentence that matters must carry a layer tag, and the tag must be justified without importing forbidden primitives. That last clause is everything, because someone can slap phi0 onto a sentence that smuggles in time, geometry, meaning, observers, or absolute containers. That isn't a tag, that's a disguise. So we need gates, 3 gates, that enforce the tag the way our other gates enforce structure. Gate 1 is the scope gate. It asks brutally, does this sentence contain time evolution, causality in time, dynamics, probability, entropy, optimization, selection, observers, agency, meaning, value, phenomenology, or cosmological history? If yes, it is not phi0. If it appears at all, it must be tagged phi1 or phi2 or research frontier, and it must be excluded from certification in episode 14. Rule of thumb: if it happens, it's forbidden here. Gate 2 is no extra content. No new primitive smuggled in under friendly names. Metric as a primitive container. Distance as a primitive. Dimension as a room we live in. Connection, curvature, a preferred time, a preferred observer, a mind substance, an information substance, all forbidden as primitives in episode 14. If any of these words appear, they can appear only as derived readouts from certified jets and topology on certified domains under invariants with explicit derived labeling. Gate 3 is well-formedness typing. Is this sentence even the kind of sentence that can be certified in Finoro? Does it refer to a licensed window, a passport, a certified domain, an operational ceiling, an uncertainty budget, an invariance class, an audit artifact, a revocation condition? If not, it may be poetry, it may be inspiring, but it is not compilable output. Now let me make this painfully concrete with an everyday picture. Imagine you and I are in a market. A vendor sells scales for weighing rice. One scale is honest, one is rigged. If you want to know which is which, you don't argue about the philosophy of weight. You test the scales. But even before you test them, you must agree on what kind of claim you're making. If I say, this scale is accurate within 1 gram, that is a certifiable claim. It has a passport. Which scale, which calibration procedure, which environment. It has uncertainty. It has replication. If I say, this scale wants to be accurate, that sentence might be poetic, but it is not the right kind of sentence. No passport, no ceiling, no uncertainty, no audit, no revocation. Layer tags prevent us from letting wants masquerade as within 1 gram. And the same thing happens in the biggest conversations humans have ever had. Science and philosophy and religion and art collide, not because one side is always lying, but because they are often speaking different kinds of sentences as if they were the same kind. Mixed truth syndrome. One person speaks a phi1 sentence as if it were phi0. Another speaks a phi2 sentence as if it were phi1. Another speaks a research frontier metaphor as if it were certified grammar. And then we argue for centuries. Episode 14 is the antidote. Now let's do a live tagging exercise. I'm going to say sentences. You feel the tags snap into place. Sentence 1. Only differences in phi are public. Absolute phi is operationally silent. That is phi0. Public meaning rule. Grammar for observability. Sentence 2. Energy, if mentioned here, is only tally. Account of distinguishable comparison activity. That is phi0, but notice, it is not a physical theory of energy. It is a restriction on how we are allowed to use the word energy without smuggling causes. It's a compiler discipline. Sentence 3. Time flows toward greater continuation. That is not phi0. That is becoming language. It belongs in Phi 1 or possibly Phi 2, depending on how it is used. In episode 14, it is excluded from certification. Sentence 4. Geometry appears as a derived readout compiled from jets. That can be Phi 0 only if we say the whole truth. Geometry is compiled, not assumed, only on certified domains, only as invariants under redescription. If we speak of geometry as the container we live inside, that is smuggling and it fails no extra content. Sentence 5. There are particles. As a primitive, rejected in episode 14. As a later interpretation of stable invariant signatures and defect charges, it may belong to Phi 2 Atlas stock or Phi 1 dynamic stock. In Phi 0, we only say entities are stability certificates, nothing more. Do you feel what happened? We didn't have to fight about particles. We sorted the sentence. That is how a compiler stays honest. Now I want to show you this same layering across scales of reality because the strength of a framework is fractal. It must hold at the quantum scale, the biological scale, the cosmic scale, and the social scale without changing its logic. At the quantum scale, Phi 0 is about what is extractable from comparison statistics. Interference patterns, correlation structures, holonomy-like memory tokens, defect-like obstructions in extension. Phi 1 is about dynamics, update laws, time evolution, decoherence, branching measures. Phi 2 is about meaning, how any of that is interpreted, how an observer is spoken about, what measurement means in lived language. Research frontier is where we put claims like hidden variables are fundamental or collapse is caused by consciousness until they are typed, operationalized, or rejected. At the biological scale, Phi 0 is what can be certified as structure. Regulatory networks as patterns, stable signatures across windows, repeatable correlates with priced uncertainty. Phi 1 is development, metabolism, evolution, processes in time. Phi 2 is pain, intention, meaning, culture. Research frontier is where we park vital forces, or any claim that tries to make life primitive rather than compiled from structure plus becoming. At the cosmic scale, Phi 0 is what can be certified as structural readout from our windows. Patterns in background radiation, distribution of galaxies, lensing signatures, topological invariance in the data. Phi 1 is cosmological evolution, inflation mechanisms, entropy histories. Phi 2 is the human story we tell about the universe, the significance we assign. Research frontier is where we keep metaphors like the universe wanted to wake up, unless we can turn them into typed, testable content. At the social scale, Phi 0 is the structure of protocols, laws, ledgers, agreements, networks of exchange, things that can be publicly audited. Phi 1 is historical change and dynamics, revolutions, economic cycles, cultural drift. Phi 2 is justice, meaning, identity, beauty. Research frontier is where we park claims like history is inevitable or a nation has an essence, until they are either formalized or refused. Across all scales, the same discipline applies. Now I need to state the prediction footprint for this part, because even our discipline must be testable in the only way it can be testable here, by forbiddenness. If this layer tagging system is necessary, then future disputes should collapse into a simple diagnosis. Layer mismatch. Someone tries to certify a becoming claim as grammar. Someone tries to sneak atlas ordering into structure extraction. Someone uses research frontier statements as if they were already compiled. And when we tag properly, the argument stops being a war and becomes sorting. So here is the forbiddenness footprint. If this part is correct, then no one will be able to present a public structure claim without being able to assign it to a layer without contradiction. If they try, the failure signature will show up immediately as a tag that cannot be justified without smuggling a forbidden primitive, or as an untyped sentence that references no window, no passport, no domain, no ceiling, no uncertainty, no invariance, no audit, no revocation. And the falsifier for this part is sharp. If there exists a statement that is necessary for public structure that cannot be assigned to the structure grammar layer, the becoming layer, the atlas and semantics layer, or research frontier, without contradiction or circularity, then the whole partition is broken. If the only way to state a necessary structural rule is to import update laws, time evolution, probability, entropy, or semantics, then episode 14 cannot be clean. That would force an open revision, or it would falsify the firewall. Now let me run the invariant stress test, because we do not merely declare discipline, we test it. The stress tests here are transformations on description, and the requirement is that the layer tag remains invariant. If phi is shifted by a constant, the tag of only differences are public stays in the structure grammar layer. If someone's tag changes, they were relying on absolute phi. If we change charts, the tag of passport discipline stays in the structure grammar layer. If changing coordinates makes someone treat a grammar claim as a becoming claim, the sentence was not well formed. If later we move a branch cut without crossing a defect, that relocation cannot change whether a sentence is grammar or becoming. If it does, the sentence depended on the cut and was never public. If we refine a window, grammar remains grammar, becoming remains becoming, atlas remains atlas, research frontier remains research frontier. Better resolution may change whether a structure is stable, but it cannot change what kind of claim stability certification is. That is the test result we demand. Now, cross-window replication. How do we replicate a claim about layer tags across different windows? We do it by giving independent teams the same set of candidate sentences and asking them to tag them, with the same explicit forbidden list and well-formedness rules. They should converge on tag classes even if their measurements differ. They may disagree about the content, but they should not disagree about the type of sentence. If they cannot converge, and if the reason is that one team requires becoming language to even define a structural claim, then we have learned something severe. Our structure grammar layer is incomplete, or our firewall is impossible. That becomes an audit event. Now I owe you the triunity reminder, because I promised it lives in every part. Even here, in a part about tagging sentences, triunity is a drift danger. People love to privilege one readout and treat it as primitive: time, space, motion. In episode 14, omega, kappa, and nu are readout labels only, three shadows of one certified derivative object, the A field. If anyone tries to talk as if omega is time itself as a primitive, that is not just a conceptual mistake. It is a category violation. It is a tag failure. Triunity is part of the structure grammar layer precisely because it prevents projection privilege from smuggling in containers. Now let me name the quiet danger out loud, because this is the word that ruins frameworks. The word is because. Because is often a dynamical word. It smuggles causality in time. It smuggles an arrow. It smuggles optimization. It smuggles meaning. So in episode 14, most of the time we do not speak in because. We speak in legal or illegal, certifiable or uncertifiable, defined or undefined, invariant or artifact, licensed or unlicensed. Episode 14 is a court of admissibility. Later episodes can bring their laws. Episode 14 decides what evidence is even allowed. Now I want to make this personal, because this is audio. I'm not speaking to a committee. I'm speaking to you. I know what happens when a mind meets a powerful theory. The mind wants to run ahead. It wants to touch the origin of stars, the arrow of time, the birth of life, the secret of consciousness. I'm not telling you those things don't matter. I'm telling you they belong to different drawers. And if we don't respect that, we destroy the one thing that makes this program different: its ability to be wrong cleanly, audited, revoked, corrected. Its ability to refuse beauty when beauty is not certified. So, part 3 is me making a promise to you. Later, when we talk about cosmogenesis, we will not pretend it was certified here. Later, when we talk about probability and entropy, we will not smuggle them in as if they were already present. Later, when we talk about consciousness and meaning, we will not pretend they were solved by a poetic sentence. We will tag, we will file, we will refuse what cannot yet be made precise. Now, I must give you the audit artifact, because we end with a ledger, not with a mood. Here is what gets written after this part. Layer tag ledger entry. Layer partition installed. Passport identification. This part's governance window is the episode 14 scope itself, logged as a scope passport containing the allowed list, the forbidden list, and the dependency list on episode 13b language tokens. Excision mask. Any sentence containing time evolution, dynamics, causality in time, probability, entropy, optimization, selection, observers, agency, meaning, value, phenomenology, or cosmological history is excised from certification in episode 14 and must be retagged as becoming, atlas, or research frontier. Certified domain for this part: the set of well-formed sentences that can be typed without importing forbidden primitives. Anything outside is undefined or unlicensed. Invariance test recorded, constant shift invariance of tags, chart change invariance of tags, cut relocation invariance of tags, window refinement invariance of tags. These are registered as requirements. Any future violation is logged as drift. Outputs produced: the 4-layer tags, and the rule that episode 14 certification is structure grammar only, while other layers may be referenced only as interface labels. Failure classifiers produced: untaggable sentence, time smuggling, geometry smuggling, observer smuggling, meaning smuggling, primitive injection. And now the revocation clause, because that is our binding promise. If any output inside episode 14 cannot be justified as structure grammar without importing forbidden primitives, it is revoked immediately, withdrawn from the certified corpus, and archived with its drift signature. If a necessary structural rule cannot be stated without importing becoming, atlas semantics, or research frontier assumptions, then the partition is revoked and the firewall must be revised openly with a logged rationale, or else the program is falsified. And here is the listener carry, the one sentence I want you to keep as a compass. Before we argue truth, we tag what kind of statement it is. That is this part. And now we can move into part 4 with a discipline strong enough to hold the entire cathedral without turning it into myth.